very warm welcome to our new Business for Humanity webcast, a journey of exploration and inspiration as we will delve into many diverse proposals and ideas to reimagine and reinvent capitalism. And what we're hoping for in this session, in these inspirational get-togethers, is to systematically explore the underlying premises, shed some more light on practical implications, unveil strengths and weaknesses of each of these approaches. And we will go through the ethical principles, the roles of institutions, practical change strategies, and anything that we can learn to make our economy a little bit better day by day by day. And we hope that for a wide audience, be it of researchers or practitioners or economists or politicians, these sessions will provide some valuable insights that you can take into your own environment and make it work. But at the same time that we together can create a credible and inspirational narrative for other people to take along. That's the premise for this new web series, and I'm very, very proud to and very excited to start this new endeavor. And today is going to be the launch, so today is going to run a tiny little bit differently, but more about that soon. Let's kick it off with a short check-in, because we want to understand who you are and where you come from. So could you bear with us on the chat with a 4-word check-in? Choose 4 words that describe A, where you're coming from today, 2, what your main role is or what role you want to take up in these calls, and finally, is there anything that intrigues you about this series, about these calls? What is that thing? In 4 words, here's your challenge. Put it on the chat and share with everybody where your mind is whilst we're sinking into the session. And whilst you're getting busy on the chat, hopefully, let me also introduce the panel, the partners in crime on this journey. And it's a very, very exciting panel today. I'm going to start with our star guest today, which without any doubt is Kees Klomp, and he's here on the list of dramatis personae as the activist, because Kees is not only a professor at the University of Windesheim in the Netherlands, a leading researcher on alternatives of capitalism, but also renowned consultant, a social entrepreneur, an activist. He called himself an uneconomist. We're going to learn about that a little bit more, and author of multiple books. And for those in the Netherlands, you will know Kees because he's on television. He's on the Financial Times, the Financial Dagblad, very often to talk about the challenges with the economy these days. And he's also former director of SMO, which is a part of Erasmus University, lecturer at the University of Rotterdam of Applied Sciences, program manager of agency, and a founding partner of the Thrive Institute. And with all of that, Kees, a very warm welcome. It's great to have you here.
Thank you. My pleasure.
And that brings me to the researcher. The researcher, of course, is Antoinette. Many of you will already know Antoinette. Antoinette is not only the president at the Institute for Work and Employment Research at the University of St. Gallen, but also a former professor, a former president of the International Network of Trust Researcher, a professor for HR management and organizational transformation, executive board member of the Swiss Academy of Social Sciences and Humanities, passionate researcher and teacher and LinkedIn activist, and many other things, as you all know. Antoinette, great to have you here.
Yeah, great to be here.
Wonderful. And so far, so good. I'm not going to present myself very much. I'm the business guy, as you can see in this round. And today, my role will be mostly to moderate. But I want to introduce 2 other personae on this chart. The first is you, the valiant explorers. And we have really, throughout the series, we would like to get a group of explorers that are willing to go to the full length with us. And let me tell you one thing that makes is a characteristic of these explorers is that they don't shy away from breakout groups. I had it very often in recent discussions that the moment you open breakout groups, everybody disappears. Here we need the opposite. We need people, as Kees always tells me, who bring something to the conversation, right? Your anger, your passion, your ideas, your local context, whatever that might be. But we need to build a story together. So one deal that we would like to make with those people who want to come on the journey is be a good sport and add your voice into the mix. And finally, the guy who's smiling at you from you at the bottom of the slide is the future. That's, of course, very sophisticated. Silvio Christoffel. Silvio is not only a member of the Institute for Work at the University of St. Gallen with Antoinette, he's also a passionate politics student and researcher and the project manager for the series. And Silvio is creating a network of student associations and students who will come into this conversation as well as representatives of the leaders of the future. So Silvio's in the future series going to represent the voice of the future. So this is Dramatis Personae. And before we go anywhere else, can I just check in with you guys? What is happening on the chat? Anything exciting? Switzerland criminal law and technology risks. Very interesting. I mean, have a look at what's happening on the chat. It's already looking very good. Can I ask for a call out? I think only I can see your hands, but those people who in the audience believe that we need to make capitalism better, can you raise your hands? Oh my God, all the hands are going, you're in the right call. Now, can I ask you the more interesting and more difficult question? Take your hands down in case you think that doing something about making capitalism better is not very easy. If it's not very easy to make capitalism better, please take your hands down again. Yes, exactly. You cannot see it, but all the hands went up and all the hands go down. It's not an easy feast, is it? We all have a natural sentiment that things should improve, but it's often not very evident how we could do so. And if we are running a business or we are a politician, it's also not so easy to find credible strategies that could take us any further. So let's, on that basis, have a quick look at what we're going to do today. Here's our route planner. In order to go onto this journey, we will need to create a little bit of a common ground so that we can all talk the same language. So the first thing we're going to do, I'm going to do it together with Antoinette, is going to set up the stage. Right? What are some of the concepts that we really should be clear on, at least amongst ourselves, before we go any further? Secondly, of course, Kees is going to call us to the adventure. What is this journey actually about, and why are we here, and how can we go about it? And I'm going to hand over to Kees, who is not only the person who brought us to this story, but also who has already done a lot of it. And then finally, Antoinette is going to take Kees's story and try to crystallize it into a research agenda for us that we can deploy systematically on the next calls. And finally, Kees and I are going to share a few glimpses of what's going to come. And then we want you in what we've called the Traveler's Tavern. We want you guys to make sense of this, have a chat amongst yourselves, and then come back to the plenary and give us your thoughts. So that on the, I think Silvio helped me on the 17th of April, when we're going to have our first guest who's going to talk about one of the paradigms. Silvio's given me a thumbs up. We all know how to do it. Deal? I hope so. Let's go. So, Business for Humanity. I'm only going to show this slide for a second. The intention is to make it educational, critical on the theory, action-oriented on the practice, inspiring for everybody, but above all, credible. So let's see how credible we are. Audience question number 1. Please get your hands ready on the chat. What would you suggest are the critical characteristics of capitalism? We want to talk about alternatives to capitalism, so we better define what capitalism is to start with. Give us any characteristics that for you are typical, critical, instrumental to capitalism. When we critique capitalism, what is it? We're going to give you 60 seconds. We're going to free of these quizzes. Don't worry, they're not too many, but free. Let's look at this. Either or thinking, dominant mental model, growth, free market. Okay, go on. I'm going to go to our researcher for an answer. Antoinette, whilst people are busy on the chat, do you want to give them the official solution to this puzzle?
Of course, that's my role here. And I have to admit, I never heard the definition of capitalism in my economics classes, funnily enough. But it's textbook knowledge, and it's generally an economic system characterized by private ownership. So I saw that. Of means of production in the operation for profit. Profit, of course, very important. Primary exchange mode is the market, where actors freely and in competition engage in economic activity. And some say credit and banking was needed to differentiate pre-capitalistic from capitalistic societies.
Very, very good. So you can see, compare what's on the chat, compare what's on the slide, right? So I think we have to be careful that we are already projecting a lot of our own thinking into the term, right? So the term has some of what we have. So I hear competition, yes, egocentric a little bit because rational choice theory is part of it. But we also need to be careful that we are not taking the term for more than it actually is. Now let's go, that was the first one, it was easy. Let's go to the second one, which is a little bit more difficult. So again, get your fingers ready to put your thoughts on the chat, 60 seconds to go. What is neoliberalism? We always talk about neoliberal capitalism. I mean, why and how does it compare maybe to liberalism? 60 seconds, let's see if anyone has an answer to this one. A recent invention that corrupts capitalism. Ah, very good. Putting the onus, survival of the fittest, no limits, no governance on system, Wild West. Jesus, no rules, selfish. John Knights. Hey, John. Very nice. Keep it going. Keep it going. Financialization. Again, just watch what's on the chat, right? It's exciting and it's really good. But Antoinette, give us the answer.
So it's a little bit like the godfather of economics, but nobody talks about it openly, as we can see. What is it? It's a revival of classical liberalism from the 18th century, where there was maximal individual autonomy at the core. And the logic was that there should be only a minimal law and order state. Now, neoliberalism, of course, is a child of the 20th century, and it's adding market fundamentalism. So the idea that the world should be a free and fair competition between individuals. And of course, it's for resizing of the abundant welfare state, hence privatization and deregulation.
Very good. So you're getting the gist. So liberalism was already about the individual. So people on the chat with egotism, selfism, there's some truth in that, even if liberalism was, of course, based on utilitarianism, which was about the greatest good for the greatest number, right? So it's not so nasty in its origin. But as Antoinette says, this is 20th century. This is Thatcher. This is Ronnie Reagan, right? This is the going back, or turning the New Deal backwards, right? So this is what we're talking about, neoliberalism. And I got one more where, again, let the chat explode, right? This must be the kind of the bread for your teeth, as we say in Italian. What is the problem with capitalism? Now here, everybody on this call should have an opinion. What are the biggest crises of capitalism? What do you think the problem is, right? Just put it on the chat. Wealth gap, centralization of wealth, extraction, polarization, uneven access to education, inequality, self-interest, shareholders, money for me above all. Very nice. Again, let it go. And I think this time, Antoinette, I don't know, but I think this time people are pretty accurate. What's your view?
Well, first book tip, read Paul Adler's 99% Economy, and he comes up with a lot of prizes. And I was given the challenge to just name 5 of them. So I would start with 1, erosion of democracy through power abuse by the mighty and wealthy. And I think for all those North Atlantic people in the call, this is at present the growth of right-wing populism and its anti-democratic sentiments, which I think is one of the biggest worries. Economic inequality. Piketty is a household name by now, his most shocking figure. Since 1995, the top 1% of the population have captured nearly 20 times more of global wealth than the bottom 50% of humanity. I think a lot of you are here because of environmental degradation. So in 2023, Earth Overshot Day fell on August 2nd, and by now almost everybody, besides some neoliberals, say it's human-made. Bad work, that's of course very important for Otti and me, because that's why we started Good Organizations. So despite new work, HL, or whatever crassy we came up, many people are still underpaid, dumber instead of smarter through their job, and feel lonely and without meaning whilst working. And last one, and then I'm finished, Otti, speculation and rentierism. So I think that's really the financialization, which was also on the talk or on the chat, really important. Growth of financial service, decoupling from the real economy. And what this does, it seems to add fuel to the fire when it comes to the negative effects of capitalism.
My God, what a list. And indeed, the 99% economy, I think the inequality is probably something that we all recognize immediately. But also, right, David was writing The Power Trap, right? So there's kind of lots of very interesting aspects of this that we can go into and explore. But I think most people today would have to realize something in the state of, I don't want to, that's Shakespeare, right? In the state of the world is not going into the right direction. But that is more easily said than done when it comes to doing something about it. And here, as I promised, so setting the stage, these are the first concepts that we're going to kind of have a common opinion on, hopefully in the future. Now's the time to bring us onto the adventure. Kees, it was your book which triggered Antoinette and myself to reach out and ask, who's this crazy Dutch person who has written about this all? We need to go into this further and understand what's going on. Where do you come from? What is this book about? Why did you start it and what's in it? Can you give us your story?
Let me start with because the book is the result of, let's say, a combination of personal experience and professional experience. So let me start with the personal experience. So I went to high school like all of you, and during high school I had classes of economics, and I can still vividly remember my first ever class in the high school in economics, where our teacher, Mr. Lagerwey, started the first class by stating, guys, in the next couple of years, I will teach you economics. And economics is a social science. It's about human behavior. So I was looking forward to it. I like humans. I like human behavior. This is going to be a cool subject. I'm going to love this class. And for the next couple of years, I was bombarded with mathematics, with calculations, with numbers. And I absolutely hated economics in school. I couldn't understand why this was about humans, why this was about behavior. It only was about calculations and models, and completely dehumanized, completely against everything I was expected it to be. So I made it to high school, and then I went on to university to study political science. And in the first year of politics, we had political theory as a subject. And I can still also there remember the first class by our professor, Siep Stuurman. And he said, guys, we can't talk about political philosophy and political science without diving deeper into economic theory. And I said, oh my God, here we go again. But then he started to give lecture about Adam Smith and Karl Marx and Keynes and E.F. Schumacher and Elinor Ostrom. And against everything that I've learned during high school, he was actually showing how all these wonderful economists had ideas and ideologies and theories about how to create a good life. So and from that moment on, I developed, let's say, a love-hate relationship with economics. So I disliked the let's say the mathematical bit, but I really liked the social and sociological bit. And later on, after the Erasmus University, I started to work at the Rotterdam University of Applied Science as a professor of applied science in economics. So my job was to research economic system change. So how can we help to facilitate and stimulate economic system change, and how can we help to translate this also into the curriculum? Because, and this is really crucially important, my chair started with the acknowledgement of one of our board members, with the acknowledgement that the Rotterdam University of Applied Science, as being one of the biggest business schools in the Netherlands, being part of the problem rather than the solution to all the crises out there that were created by a very limited approach on economics. So my job was to see how to enhance critical thinking in economics also in our university. So I started to dive deeper into economics, and I came to a very profound conclusion. Economics looks very neutral and objective. So people, my students, all of them perceived economics as being an objective, neutral, kind of hard, natural science, based upon models like this by Samuelson, that describe economics as the material metabolism of human society. But what I discovered, and we can look at it on the next slide, that my personal experience in economics were actually quite decisive also for a lot of the way that my students were being taught economics at school. So I wasn't an exception, I was actually the rule. So my dear friends of our new economy in the Netherlands, which is an economic think tank, they did a proper research on economics in the Netherlands, and they found out quite shocking percentage, which showed that almost 87% of all economics that we teach in schools, being high schools as well as university, is neoclassical economics. So the economics that I had in school, which was taught to me as being economics, is actually neoclassical economics. So I was confronted with a lot of students that when I showed them the pluralistic and heterodox elements in economics, were quite overwhelmed by the fact, because they had all been brainwashed basically in school with only this one approach being neoclassical economics. So,
Professor Klomp.
Yes.
Can we ask a question? Because
yes,
this sounds like an optimum kind of opportunity to put another concept in our travel bag, right? You just mentioned neoclassical economics. I wonder, right, people on the call, again, a 60-second question to you guys. Well, what is neoclassical economics?
Yes, let's see how.
If nobody says something on the call, I would understand it. But who knows?
Yeah.
Does anyone know what we mean by? No idea, exactly. It's kind of it's very interesting, right? As Kees is just saying, most of what is taught in business school falls
Almost
under
90%.
neoclassical economics, but kind of nobody really understands what exactly. Number digest, exactly. Growth economics, yeah, not quite boring one-sided thinking, yeah, maybe. Shall we give the answer onto that, just to not interrupt Kees for too long?
Yeah, I can understand it. I can understand Kees, because it reminds me also of endless mathematics. And to quote Keynes here, I had to a large proportion, recent mathematical economics are mere concoctions as imprecise as the initial assumptions they rest on. So what are these initial assumptions? We also already know now, we should question them. Rational, self-interested man really, perfect and competitive markets, general equilibrium model, and scarcity and efficiency as main benefits.
So it's a very reductive way of framing economics, mainly as a mathematical model, which doesn't necessarily bear any resemblance to reality. Kees, is that what you had in mind?
Yes, this sounds really familiar. And what is really crucially important, that it sounds neutral, but it's actually it's extremely normative. And it also comes with consequences, because I think that this is one of the reasons that we find out that there's all sorts of international research that actually shows that when students start to study economics in this way, where they are not being told that it's actually a very plural, very heterodox science, but only neoclassical science, they actually become tangibly, empirically sound, more egocentric during their studies. So people get formed by the way that they perceive economics. So it's not only normative, but it's also formative. And this is actually was one of the alarm bells that made Shinta and I start to work on a book, because the problem is not the fact that economics is only neoclassical economics. The problem is that it's being taught as if it's only neoclassical economics. Because if you dive a little bit deeper into economics, you know, it doesn't have to even dive that deep. You can discover that it is and this is a wonderful slide by it's from my school, the book that I wrote about existential economics, but it's actually based upon a model of Hayu Chan, who is one of the professors that dive deeper in the pluralistic aspects of economics. And much to the surprise of my students, there is an abundant variety of different economic schools out there. A Marxist economic school, ecological economics, feminist economics, Austrian economics, complexity economics, and they have all very, very different approaches on allocation. Yeah? So the allocation that we've been taught in neoclassical economics, which a lot of our the students assume is economics, is only a very normative, formative way of allocation. There are many other ways possible. And to make it even more complex, in mainstream economics, there is a knowledge and an acceptance of, let's say, 20 official heterodox economic, let's say, systems or approaches. But underneath that, there's even a bigger diversity and multiplicity of non-mainstream, non-yet accepted economic theories out there. And a lot of those new economic theories and ideas are the ones that are resonating most to a lot of our students in the case of how do we change the economic system. And that's the reason why Shinta and I made this book, because it's almost impossible for lecturers and students to find all these material. So, you know, all the mainstream economics books sell the same neoclassical economic bullshit. And if you have a very enlightened teacher and a very enlightened lecturer, he or she will find other theories and ideas out there and present them and share them with his student. But it's hard work because it's all over the place. It's very diverse, it's very pluralistic, it's very heterodox, it's very non-traditional. So we decided to find a way to get them all together in a book. So at least the lecturers have a very simple way to present these students, our students, these ideas. And we work with this. And I'm quite happy to say that it also works, because if you present these ideas, then students can also work with them. And well, in the next couple of months, we are going to dive deeper into a lot of these non-traditional, non-mainstream, heterodox, new economic theories and ideas to see if they have real potential to be scaled up as a proper alternative to the dominance of neoclassical economics. And as a starter of today, I'm going to take you to a couple of these approaches. Some of them might be really familiar with you, otherwise might not be that familiar, but just to give you a short taster of a couple of these theories and approaches. Yeah? So let me start with the first one, which is of course the most well-known one, at least in the Netherlands, and I assume that is the case in most European countries, which of course is the donut economy, donut economics by Kate Raworth. And you know, there's a lot to say about donut economics, and we will do this in a later stage, somewhere this year. But I think that the main takeout of what donut economy or donut economics brings to the economic theory is the acknowledgement that there is such a thing as ecological and social foundational capital. So the acceptance that there is such a thing as an ecological ceiling and a social foundation, and that there in between is a just space for humanity and therefore also for economy, is the essence of what the donut economy is all about, which basically boils down to the acceptance that there is such a thing as foundational capital. And foundational capital, of course, is a very active element, especially in finance and accounting. But it's also really important from a planetary perspective. So everything that the Stockholm Resilience Center is doing now with the 9 planetary boundaries is also about foundational capitals, because if we cross these boundaries, we are actually crossing the well, basically the boundaries that create the possibilities for humanity to thrive. So we are crossing also ecological foundational capital rather than only financial foundational capital. So this is the first one. We'll get back to that later. The second one is well-being economics. And well-being economics is, again, a very active field with a lot of interesting thinkers out there. And I think there are two really important takeouts that we can take into account. And first of all, and as you can see in the midst of this picture, there is well, in my humble opinion, the world famous, but I'm not sure that everybody knows it, but the world famous triangle by Herman Daly that makes a distinction between ultimate means and intermediate means, and intermediate ends and ultimate ends, which is really, really crucially important, because economics mostly focuses on welfare. And one of the things that we can learn from well-being economics is that welfare is not an end, it's a means. So well-being is always an end. And what's really interesting is that welfare is based upon an economic perspective on humanity, whereas well-being is a sociological perspective on humanity. And the differences that stem from that step are really, really interesting. So we will dive deeper into that later as well. Then thirdly, one of my personal favorite, being a Buddhist practitioner myself, yes, folks, there really is such a thing as Buddhist economics. And in my humble opinion, Buddhist economics brings one very fundamental, or even foundational element to economic theory and thinking, which is sufficiency. So Buddhist economics is one of the few economic approaches that takes the mind really, really serious. So it doesn't necessarily focus on human behavior, but it focuses on mental models. And rather than focusing on efficiency and welfare growth, Buddhist economics focuses dramatically on sufficiency, so enoughness, which is really, really interesting to use in retrospect to an ever increasing amount of production and consumption, which is the definition of economic growth, as you all know. So we will dive deeper into Buddhist economics also later on to see if it is a potential alternative to deal with allocation issues the way that we are doing right now. Then fourth, ecological economics. And ecological economics is one of the originally, let's say, heterodox, non-mainstream approach on economics that is actually becoming mainstream. So with a little bit of fantasy, you could say, for instance, that Kate Raworth is with her donut economy is basically ecological economics. And ecological economics is, of course, Herman Daly was one of the founding fathers of ecological economics. In the later on this year, we will invite Robert Costanza, who's also one of the main thinkers, economists out there, to talk about ecological economics in relationship to well-being. But the most important outtake of ecological economics is as simple as it is profound, which is that an economy is by definition a subset of ecology. And that changes everything. Because economists in the original sense of the word, so the neoclassical economics, treat nature as a non-existent element in the economic sphere, which of course is delusional. Then local economics, also really interesting. We will invite and dive deeper into local economics with Helena Norberg, who is one of the thinkers behind local economics. And local economics is as simple again as it is profound by acknowledging the fact that one of the issues with capitalism is the fact that it has been completely globalized and also dominated by big international multinational corporates. Whereas the problem is not in economics. If only we can create an economy again, which is hyper local to where people become the economy. So what is really interesting and intriguing about her book Local is Future is that she makes a very strong point to in between the crisis we're in and the distance that people experience when they think about production and consumption and allocation. So she thinks that the closer we can make economics directly, geographically, the better the chances are that economics will be sustainable, because people are the economy then, rather than economics is something that happens on another continent. So we will also dive deeper into that. Next one, yes, degrowth economics, really important. There's a lot to say, but what degrowth economics boils down to is the acknowledgement that economic growth is not the solution, but the problem, at least in the opinion of degrowth economics. That's how the only sustainable economics is an economy that seriously decreases production and consumption, and therefore output, as a way to deal with the challenges. And we will also invite an economist to furtherly explore and discuss how this is. And this is a very interesting subject as well, because degrowth economics is married in a lot of cases to eco-socialism. So a lot of the economists that are proclaiming degrowth economics don't think it's matchable with capitalism as a system, which is really interesting to further elaborate and investigate with them. So they think it's impossible to leave that to the market. And then I think we have one more. Isn't it? Yes. We also two more. Oh. We also have commons economics. And this is a very interesting subject as well. And I'm really glad and also a bit proud to mention that Jessica Gordon Nembard will be part of this series to discuss the potential of initiatives that are taking rapid growth, at least in the Netherlands. I can't speak for all of you in the chat, but in the Netherlands, the rise of the commons is one of the most profound changes that we see in economics, where we see more and more people that reclaim part of their living conditions and living environment back from the market or the market state, because after a couple of decades of neoliberalism, market and state are, of course, so closely intertwined that there is no difference anymore. So these folks see the creation of commons as a third way next to state and market to allocate resources. And again, this is also interesting because also commons are really hard to combine with capitalism. So also a very interesting discussion later this year about these relationships. And then last but not least, feminist economics, of course. Really important development as well in many for many different reasons. But in this case, we are going to focus on one of the things that is really classical, neoclassical economics, namely the choice to put a price tag on value. Yeah. So neoclassical economics is the approach where we can only work with price if it's about value, because everything in neoclassical economics happens, of course, via the market, and the only way that we can work with value on the market is by putting a price tag on it. And we have the feminist economics to think to criticize this very material amputated version of value and the emancipation of care work. So I'm really looking forward to discuss this as well. And we will have Julie Nelson in our midst to discuss this in a later case. So there's a lot of stuff to look forward to make a long story short.
Oh, fascinating it is, Kees. Thank you so much. And I fully agree with Tiffany on the chat, who's saying this is also new to me. I feel like a total fish out of the water. I would actually say I feel a little bit like there's a famous historian in ancient China called Sima Tan, who at about 100 BC, after the Warring State period, was describing what was called the 100 schools of philosophy. that popped out during the preceding 300 to 400 years. And he's describing 6 different systems like Taoism, Confucianism, agriculturalism, naturalism. I mean, it is uncanny. It sounds very familiar to some of those approaches that you mentioned. So maybe we're just repeating the past here 2,000 years later. And who knows what's going to come as the solution. But I want to, before I ask you another question, Kees, I want to go to the audience. Now, you've listened patiently to all of this. Have you already got a paradigm that excites you? Is there one that you really like and want to know more about? Give it to us on the chat. If there's any one that you thought, that could be interesting, I want to learn more. And by the way, on the website, for all of those who want to understand what the kind of 1 or 2 books are that really frame this nicely, the great thing is Kees has almost interviewed everybody in this field. He's almost read every book in this field. So we will make available for you an exclusive selection of the 1 or 2 books on every one of these paradigms that you should really look at if you want to learn them. So you don't need to go through the libraries and figure out what to read. Kees is going to make his personal knowledge available to all of you. Feminist, degrowth, Buddhist economics.
You name it.
I mean, it sounds as if we want them all. I think Emma was saying it right away. We want all of them. But and that's great, everybody. I think we're getting excited. But Kees, so you wrote the book with Shinta, and you went through all of these, and you had kind of some great stories in the book. Why this series then? Is it not all done? What's the challenge, so to speak, that is open for us together on this call and in the future sessions?
Well, one of the things that is really important is to understand that if we talk about, and this is something I learned from my professorship and research, that we have this very delusional assumption, but very powerful assumption that there is such a thing as an economy wherein we live. Whereas in reality, it's actually the system that lives in us. Yeah, so a lot of what we think is economics is actually based upon stories and ideas that we've taught ourselves and conditioned and culture. And they have become very real. They have become, let's say, a reality that we associate and that we experience as being a hard truth. Whereas in fact, it's all based upon stories.
I think if I can paraphrase, what you're arguing for is we need the room to evaluate. We need to create some sort of arm's length between us and the system we are in, but maybe also all these different approaches to have a vantage point from which we can maybe even look at the coherence of these approaches, the strengths and weaknesses of these approaches. And I think as part of what we want to do, also maybe some integration, some synthesis, some narrative that we can credibly all together on this call stand behind and bring into our environments. I think there's still a little bit of work to do.
No, well, the reason I was overwhelmed with joy when Antoinette and you contacted me was Shinta and I just wanted to tell the stories. And what you guys invited me and what we are doing now today for the first time is to see if there is serious potential in one of these approaches. Is there something that we can really scale up and really create an alternative to the way that our system works, which is super exciting and also I think super relevant
and super difficult.
Yeah.
So I think we, on this note, I think we've primed the floor for Antoinette, because I think, Antoinette, we need 2 things, right? So building on the variety that Kees opened up for us. One, we need to have some common framework, some inquiry method almost to apply in the future sessions. And secondly, I think, again, as I said, we need everybody in the breakouts, because as Kees is saying, there's so many economies as we are people with our contingent different situations that we're finding ourselves in. So we need that insights to bring it back to the reality, not only the theory. But let's start with the theory, Antoinette. So how can we make sense of this? How can we cluster this somehow? Are there methods we can build on?
Yeah, I mean, I have to admit that my head is exploding too. But how can we make a map in all this complexity? And so we were looking around and we first started to think, well, we have to look at what also Kees was saying about, we have to look at the different ideas and ideals. So here's an example for that. For instance, should we all go more with the commons instead of individual property rights? And then, of course, we would have Elinor Ostrom, Nobel Prize winner, to take us there. Or do we need to liberate work, or at least the workers, through a basic income? An idea, by the way, dating back to 1797. I didn't know that, Thomas Paine. Or do we need degrowth in production and better, higher goods consumption, as Serge Latour has been asking for, among others, of course? Or should we strengthen the plural sector, as Mintzberg is asking for? I mean, we can look at the different ideas, but you already see a lot of these are out there. Then I believe that we also should, secondly, focus on bettering the components of economic systems. So we heard about that already. So for instance, instead of free markets, should we go to planned economy? Or should we go to contained or regulated markets? And how would that look like? Instead of the unencumbered, rational, self-interested Homo economicus, should we go to moral reasoning? Or should we look for much stronger and wider circles of concerns and care? And also, of course, instead of private property, would it better to work with community property or even a property owning democracy? So we can look at the different components, of course, as well. And then we also need to go beyond markets and the minimal state, where we started, and understand the different spheres and mechanisms and levels where humans and business are embedded in. So you see here, there are so many different levers and levels we can look at, and different types of embeddedness. So that might be a different way to, how do you always say, Otti, skin the cat? I think so. Yeah, I'm not so very good with these English sayings. And then I think, and we heard that already, it's also very important to think about transformation. And here is one of those papers I really liked, because it tried to summarize different narratives of circular economy. You can see that is already mind-boggling how many are up there. But what they were doing is they tried to sort these concepts in how they envisage transformation. So they range from doing the same differently till demanding a complete and fundamental transformation of society. And of course, we also have to take that on board. But I fear so far I haven't given you a clear way to look at or to build a map. So we have to dig a little bit deeper.
And maybe this brings us to yet another concept, difficult concept that already Kees alluded to put into our travel bag. And that is the difficult notion of social ontology, because of course all these different frames, what they're trying to do in different ways is look at what the social ontology looks like. And here the question to the chat, I mean, we already stressed you out with neoliberalism. Now comes another big one. What is a social ontology? Has anyone got any clue? Throw it on the chat again, 60 seconds for you to figure out what these basic concepts for our journey signify. Social ontology, any views? There's a cat on the history. I like the cat, Adam. The cat has the answer, I think is what Adam is saying. History, economics is about finance. This is about social aspects. That's a good point. Whereas economy, of course, economics is also social activity, right? It's social interaction. So what is the problem, as Kees said, that economics has become just mathematics and then there's social science on the other side? Social systems, that's already close. Answer, do you want to give the answer?
Yeah, I mean, I already liked how society is made up, among other things. So ontology as such means the study of what exists and the nature of being. And if that is too abstract for you, I try to make it clear with social ontology. So social ontology is the study of the nature and properties of the social world. So some of you were really close. And it is concerned with analyzing things in the world that arise from social interactions, and with explaining what makes them the things they are. That is how the social world is finally constructed or constituted. Now that depends, of course, on your ontology and epistemology, how you would frame it.
And maybe, Antoinette, this cracks the nut, the elephant in the room of this notion of complexity and emergence. I mean, everybody is coming around with these difficult terms. If you take social ontology and complexity, what's the result?
Well, I mean, we find this a very helpful framework to understand the economy as a complex social system. So that's from Critical Realism, very hard read on the side. And it posits that within complex social systems, we encounter three essential entities: people, which have agency and are reflective; ideals, so for instance, culture; and institutions, all the socio-technical structures. And each we have to understand to make sense of the open and social system. But it's also, of course, their combined interactions which generate then complex mechanisms that might, under certain circumstances, translate into certain constellation, and that we might detect as visible performance empirically. So, I mean, we obviously cannot really all see what's going on in this complex system. And this also has important implication for those reflective change agents we see here, because we cannot just pick and choose our roles in such complex systems. There is no action without context. So we always have to look at the context. And we always also act in a system which preceded us to a certain degree. And this limits our action on the one hand, but of course, to some degree, it also enables it. So we have to take all this into account.
So if I understand you correctly, Antoinette, what you're saying is, behind all these categorizations that you showed us earlier, there's an understanding of how social systems actually look like.
Yeah.
And what you're saying is, if we take this frame, what we see above the waterline is not just a mathematical model, as Kees pointed out, but it's an emergence of these different entities under the waterline. So ideas and culture and the people and the agency, as well as the institutions and the social structures. How would that then, if you take this as a framework, what does that mean for how you're going to investigate the different paradigms in the future?
Well, let's go first into the single entities to understand that a little bit better. So derived from this framework, we will look at ideals and ask what are the core values and ethical principles that underpin alternative economic models. And the second important question is, how do these principles then align with or differ from traditional capitalist systems? And of course, we can already imagine they often differ quite starkly, but it's not always as clear. It's not always unearthed as an assumption. And that's one thing we certainly want to do. Now, next to that entity, of course, we would also look at institutions. So, and I think it's on the next slide, Otti.
I was checking, here you go.
So we also look at institutions. So I was talking about the components, if you remember, and in particular with the big question in mind, how do these then align with the stated values and objectives of these different systems? And with this then in mind, we can look at, we could call it the solution space. So look at that this different ways, different mechanisms always ask the alignment. So political institutions and governance will be important. Regulation, or the way that economic decision making is more centralized or decentralized. And of course, very important is finance and investment structures. We heard that already, how that causes at present more pain than benefits. So how would it look like with stock markets or investment processes? Economic structures, and you have gone the next one, which means I should be a little bit quicker, labor markets, etc. And let me just have the last sentence. Above all, we will also have to inquire always what the responsibility, power, and internal organization of businesses would look like. Now, of course, you took me to the next one, the transformation. And here I think we need to look at both the change strategy as well as the role of transformational agency and the needed moral reflection on the side of the actors on the one hand, but also regarding collective leadership. Now, if we put all these together, we come to your next slide. And the next slide is, again, why then, if we put this all together, is social ontology significant? Well, primarily, it's a clear understanding of social ontology provides us a robust scientific framework to explore all these alternatives to capitalism comprehensively, because it enables us to pose systematic questions about the social entity and compare how different approaches address these questions. Now, that's the first and important thing for us, that we can lead you in a systematic way through it. But secondly, by delving deeper, we can try to grasp the underlying ethical foundations inherent in these approaches. It's not just about understanding how each model depicts the economic system, but it's also about the why. And I'm not going Simon Sinek now. What are the perspectives and what constitutes a good economy or a good life or a good society? In what ways does their approach make this economy better, more just, and for whom? And we can also assess the coherence between their ethics and their institutions or interventions, which then becomes really crucial in this regard. And finally, if throughout our journey, we happen to align on the type of economy we aspire to create, let's call it a good economy, then we can integrate all these valuable insights from various paradigms that resonate with this vision. I mean, that's a very high task, but who knows? And ultimately, we hope not only to craft a compelling new narrative, taking up Kees's point, but also to address crucial questions like how to foster responsibility within businesses and what it truly means to embody good leadership.
I think if I understood you correctly, Antoinette, then what you're suggesting is that we will look at each of these paradigms in the future sessions.
Yeah.
We have some questions about the values and ideals. We have some questions that relate to institutions, and we have some questions relate to people and agency and transformation. Already great chat on some of the agency-related questions there. And then we will try to understand the ethics and the worldviews almost that sit behind each of these. And in the end, if we like them, we're going to try to build a narrative across all of those. Is that, do I get this about right?
You get this about right, yes.
Sounds like a very hard journey to me. So I hope everybody on the call is on board with us. And on that note, I will take you briefly into our kit bag. So kind of what have we got in the travel bag so far? We've got a definition of capitalism, and you will have it with the recording and on the website. We've agreed on neoliberalism and what it is. We have a very strong view altogether on the crisis of capitalism. We also have looked at what the problem is with neoclassical economics and where it potentially deceives us in the simplicity that it brings, and also in some of the normativity, as Kees pointed out. We've now looked at social ontology as a basis for going further, and Antoinette has brought us this ideals institutions transformation frame as a frame of analysis. So it sounds like we're in a little bit better shape already than when we started what was 15 minutes ago. But we will test that with the first approach that is coming. So Kees, can you briefly take us through what is going to be next on this series? What's going to happen in April and then in the months to follow?
So what we are going to do is, as I already shared with you, the Thrive book is a collection of non-traditional, pluralistic, heterodox approaches on economics. And in the upcoming months, on a monthly basis, we will invite writers, thinkers, academics on this subject, and we will dive deeper for a complete session into that specific approach, whether that is degrowth or commons or ecological economics or feminist economics or Buddhist economics. We will take a deep dive using the framework that Antoinette has just shared with you to test the water, to see if what the potential is of that element. And what we will also share with you on the website is, as the Thrive book is a collection of essays by the various writers to make it accessible and also digestible for students.
We have a favorite case. I need to ask you: is there one you're looking for towards most?
Well, I'm really looking forward to spend time with Robert Costanza, who is one of my heroes, and of course, being a Buddhist myself, I am really fond to share the insights of Buddhist economics, because I think it's so profound to take the mind serious into economics. So those two are my personal favorites. But as you can see in this smorgasbord of books, there is an abundance of approaches out there. And
who's the next case? Can you present the next one?
And that will be Christian Welber. And Christian Welber is the writer, the thinker, the doer behind what is called the economy for the common good. And Christian is an interesting figure in many ways. But what's really nice is that the economy for common good is an international movement. So it has chapters in multiple countries. It also combines a macroeconomic perspective on economics with a microeconomic initiative. So there are multiple companies in multiple countries that actually work with the principle, and that principle we share it here in the matrix. Is what's the essence of economy for common good is that it values an organization or a company radically different than in mainstream economics. So common good economics is based upon the fact that the societal issue or the societal value of a company is actually more important than the financial value of a company. And the whole theory is based upon that assumption. So how can you enhance the societal value of a company rather than the financial issue? And they have created, Christian and his colleagues have developed methods to actually make that work. So I'm really looking forward to spend time with him and dive deeper into his philosophy.
I think, again, a brilliant opportunity for people on the call to also ask some practical questions, as Kees is pointing out, which brings me to the final bit, and then we're going to ask you for a brief feedback and some advice from your side as to where to go next. The final point is what can you expect in terms of the structures of the sessions that we're going to run? And we're going to experiment with this. This is our current MVP, kind of minimum viable product number 1. We're going to have the first hour where we're going to have a presentation or an interview with our guests who are presenting their respective paradigm. We're going to then explore the presentation with some questions, some of them that Antoinette already shared, some of them you will be able to offer from the chat, and we're going to ask so that we really understand what these people are about. And of course, there's pre-reading, as Kees points out, on the website. Then we're going to break into dialogue with everybody on the call to digest this and see what it means to us and what we want to take away from it. We're going to have a plenary conversation. And then there's an optional third block for the hardliners, for the people who really want to be travelers with us on the journey. And that's what we call the meta inquiry, the sky view, where we will try to compare different paradigms, different proposals with each other, and create that essence that Antoinette talked about to build our own narrative, right? So 3 parts. The first is exploring Christian Felber next time. Then the second part, discussing dialogue, examination amongst ourselves. And finally, the comparison of paradigms, which of course in the first session we won't be able to do, but after the first sessions, we're going to go into this meta inquiry. And with that, the moment for you. So we would like you to take away briefly, we're going to not make this long, but please bear with us, 10-15 minutes max, and then a quick debrief, and then we're out. 3 questions to you. What answers do you really need from this series? If you invest your time, if you come onto these calls, what answers do you want in return, right? What are the 1 or 2 things that you really want to get out of this? Secondly, what are you willing to bring? Is there anything you can bring in terms of experience, or are you willing to try some things, or what is it that you can invest into this and commit to? And finally, if we want to influence the world of economics across countries, who are the people that we really need in this conversation? Is it regulators? Is it politicians? Is it business leaders? Is it some exemplars? Is it associations? Is it students? Everybody, we thank you very much for being co-travelers on this journey. We hope to have lots of co-creation with you folks. Thanks for the brilliant chat. I want to, again, on behalf of both Kees and Antoinette and also Sylvia, thank you so much for making your knowledge available to us. Lots of great thinking. Please help us also to bring some other folks into the series. Have a look at the website. About 2 weeks before the session with Christian, we're going to load the pre-readings and other resources that we might find all for you. With that in mind, have a great rest of the week, and to see you guys soon. All the very best.